Welcome back to another video from Grounded. I'll try to do a video at least once a week. Today's video is all about where are we creating from. Now there's two places in which we can be creating, or at least trying to create our lives from. The first is what I call the unconscious, creating from an unconscious space versus creating from a conscious space. Now when we take our identity to be that personal sense of self, our mind, our emotions, our past, our thinking mind, when we're creating from that space, we are creating unconsciously. Now what do I mean by that? Now this personal sense of self that we have, that we believe ourselves to be, is actually created in avoidance. Now our personal sense of self, what we're aware of, what we're consciously aware of on a conscious level, is the sense of where we want to go, but there's no real knowledge of why we want to create. So when we're coming from the unconscious aspect, we're trying to create, but we're not really fully aware of why we're trying to create, where we're coming from when we're creating. So let me give an example of what I'm trying to say. Now, if you're trying to manifest an abundance of money in your life, and you're coming from the unconscious part, you're trying to create and manifest money because you hold a subconscious belief that says I lack. So the painful belief is I lack, and that's the unconscious aspect of us that we're unaware of. This is the personal sense of self. The unconscious aspect that we're unaware of has a deep-rooted belief of lack, and so what we're only aware of on the conscious part is that drive outwards to try to create more money, not realizing that we're actually coming from a place of lack. Or if there's a deep desire to find a relationship, I have to find somebody, I need somebody in my life, and it's painful not to have somebody in your life, that is coming from the unconscious part of it, feeling alone. On an unconscious level we feel truly deeply alone. And so the conscious part is that seeking, that urging to find somebody. So this is when we're coming from that personal sense of self. When we're coming from a personal sense of self, which is our mind created, who we think we are, we're coming from a place that is built on top of unconscious painful beliefs. So we are trying to create in the world unconsciously because we don't realize that we're trying to come from a place of pain. We're trying to move out of a place of pain. This is why you see all this shit about trying to find happiness. Got to try to be happy, try to find happiness. Happiness is out there, I've got to go and get it, I've got to go and attain it. Now you've only got to go and attain it and got to go get it because you're coming from a place of true, deeply unhappiness. So the unconscious part is that personal perspective of me, my body, my mind, my emotions, my past, which is built upon painful beliefs, thoughts and associations with past undealt with trauma. And then so when we're coming from that place, all we are aware of is our conscious mind, this thinking mind up here, and we're trying to create in a movement away from how we feel underneath of it all. Now that is creating from unconsciousness, and that's how most human beings are living. They're actually trying to create an avoidance pattern, trying to move away from that personal sense of self, which underneath what they're aware of is very painful. So that's the personal. Okay. Now the other place of creating is coming from a place of consciousness, where an individual has done enough work to have moved through their personal sense of self, to have moved through and began to see what they identify with past traumas, working through their emotion, working through their painful beliefs. This person has stepped beyond that personal sense of self, that containment of personal sense of self, and they have awoken to the oneness behind it. Now, creating from that space, you are creating from your life's purpose. So when you've awoken, once you've moved through your personal sense of self, and you've penetrated through into the painful beliefs, the painful associations, the painful emotions, the painful past trauma, as your consciousness awakens and moves through these layers, it penetrates the personal sense of self, liberating itself from these painful beliefs, from this painful past. And so when you're consciously, when you're coming from the space of consciousness itself, there is no limitations to what you can create. What you can create, but it has to be in alignment with your blueprint, with your what some might class as soul purpose. So these are the two different aspects. So you're either creating from that personal sense of self, which is all in avoidance, or you're creating from the part of yourself that has awoken through the personal sense of self and has self-realized enough to be able to follow its unique blueprint, its unique soul purpose. Now, when that state is awoken, once you've truly awoken to yourself and you're fully conscious of yourself, and you have the ability to step into the personal and then step out into the impersonal, this is when you no longer have to seek anything. You're not trying to seek anything external. You're not focused on what your current reality is reflecting back to you. When you have the ability to step out into the impersonal, into what you truly are, you're in that space, and from that space life will change, and events and situations will happen to bring about the scenario for you to fulfill your life's purpose. So the differences between the two states and how they work in reality is that personal sense of self is trying, having, and it's got to get, and it needs to go out and needs to work hard, and it needs to do everything in its power to try to obtain this movement away from pain, whereas the awoken state of consciousness is the state of just being in that space, just being the consciousness itself. And through that, there is no trying to put yourself into the world. There's no trying to grasp, no trying to hold on, no trying to get, no trying to seek. It just comes from a place of naturalness. And this is what flow is all about. This is what life flow is about. When you're in the flow of yourself, where you're not even focused on what's actually happening, you're not focused on the situation in your life, you're just focused on that place of being. And from that place of being, the whole reality that you live in begins to shift to align with that. Whereas before, in this personal sense of self, your reality is aligned with all of them subconscious programs, all of them painful beliefs. That's what you keep seeing. This is why your life becomes a repetitive cycle. You keep seeing these painful experiences show up, show up, show up, show up, show up, show up, show up. And that's because you're an attraction point for it. Well, you're drawing to you whatever you hold at a core level. So if your core level is residing in the space of consciousness, then you're drawing to your life purpose. If you're in the personal sense of self, which is built upon these painful thought structures and beliefs, these painful thought structures and beliefs are drawing more the same to you to help awaken you out of them. So that's the difference between the two states. I hope it didn't mind boggle you. I do understand that my teachings come from a place of great depth, and it takes a while for you to really begin to penetrate your own awakening to actually get to the level in which you can fully hear these teachings for all of the depth and wisdom that is within them. Anyway, to the next one. Love, peace and joy.